On behalf of the Silicon Valley Education Foundation, all our partners, thank you for coming out to our forum on Common Core state standards. We're going to cover a lot of ground today, but first I'd like you to take out your devices. And the first question I usually ask when I go to a room is, how do I get on the internet? So we'll answer that for you first. The network ID is MSFT INET, and in the spirit of transparency, there's no password. And we encourage you to tweet, Facebook, use all your social media to share this information. We have a great panel in front coming up, but we'll share a little bit more about that later. But first and foremost, I'd like to invite up our host who's been partnering with us for years in this space to provide these community dialogues, which is Microsoft, and I'd like to invite Thea Smith Nelson to come on up to the stage. Please join me in welcoming her. A great philanthropist in the company Microsoft, and Thea is a great person to know.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Microsoft. We're happy to serve as your respite from the storm today. It's days like this when I'm really happy to be working at a satellite office and not out of our headquarters up in Seattle area. So on behalf of the 2,500 employees that we have in the Bay Area, welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time to be here today to discuss the latest on Common Core implementation. As Community Outreach Manager for Microsoft Silicon Valley offices, it is my pleasure to be able to host hundreds of nonprofit organizations throughout the year at this campus, 7 just this week, in fact, to discuss issues of importance to the community. And in fact, education is the top priority issue for most of our engagements. At Microsoft, we really do recognize how critical education is to our community and to our company in particular. Along with many other high-tech companies, as I'm sure you know, we struggle to identify local talent to fill the job requisitions that we have open. And I think it goes without saying that that's a real shame. So we so value the work that SVEF is doing to ensure that students are learning in the STEM areas, science, technology, engineering, and math, and that educators are receiving the latest research and trends to help local youth. Microsoft is doing our small part through our cross-company Youth Spark initiative, which includes programs like Skype and Windows in the Classroom, Partners in Learning, our international student competition called Imagine Cup, and DreamSpark, to name a few. DreamSpark is a program that gives no-cost access to Microsoft's developer tools to students. So in its first year, YouthSpark served over 100 million youth. We are obsessed with tracking these numbers, as SVF is obsessed with algebra and other important things. And we have a goal of reaching 300 million youth by 2015, thanks to the great work of organizations and individuals, many of whom are in this room. So our YouthSpark national partners include Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, Boys and Girls Clubs, City Year, Junior Achievement, and Year Up. And we also work closely with the local chapters of not only those, but other organizations locally that share our mission of helping youth realize their full potential. While Microsoft has focused much of our philanthropic efforts toward overcoming this opportunity divide that we talk so much about, we continue to support nonprofits in a variety of ways. So last year, for example, Microsoft contributed over $900 million in cash and software to nonprofit organizations worldwide, including tens of millions here in the Bay Area. Our U.S. employee giving campaign resulted in donations of $100 million to nonprofits worldwide. And in Silicon Valley, we are actually the leading site in corporate philanthropy in Microsoft, so we have 85% of our employees here who have participated in the campaign. We're really, really proud of that number. Thank you. Thank you. And I also am proud to announce that we recently improved our matching program. So we give each employee $15,000 a year in matching funds to the charitable contributions of their choice. And we also match their volunteer time at a rate of $17 per hour to the nonprofits at which they work. So having said all of this, we recognize that the most important work is being done by those of you in this room. So once again, thank you very much. We're lucky to be in a position to help support this work, and we're honored to continue to do so. And I'll just end on a personal note, as not just a Bay Area native, but a Mountain View native, born and raised, graduate of Mountain View High School and Foothill College, go Owls. I'd like to express a very heartfelt thank you to the Silicon Valley Education Foundation for helping to improve education in my hometown. I'm sure I'm not supposed to have favorites in my role, but I love working with SVEF, and I'll just say that I so appreciate the dedication and passion that you bring to your work. So thank you. And thank you to all the speakers for being with us today to share your passion and expertise. Thanks.
You know, we work with lots of great corporations in the Valley, and Microsoft is one of the most exceptional. As you see this wonderful space, lots of corporations wouldn't think to open it up, and Microsoft has opened it up for years. We're also happy to have Jonathan Noble in the audience from Microsoft as well. Thank you for being here. And I'd like to also recognize a couple of our other partners in this event. One is Texas Instruments, and the other one is Southwest Airlines. Kim Delvet is here. Kim, thank you. We'll hear from you later. And do our bags still fly free? We also have lots of great not-for-profit partners who made this event possible, such as, and please stand up when you're in the audience, Santa Clara County Office of Education, RAFT, New Teacher Center, Schmall Science. Please give them a round of applause. To us, you're all celebrities, but we have certain individuals I would like to call out. If you're an elected official, I know Assemblywoman Susan Bonilla is here as well, but please, if you're an elected official, please stand up and take a bow as well. Or if you'd like to be an elected official, please take a bow. Please stand up. And a former elected official, Ted Lempert, is here as well. Ted, thank you for being here. And we're happy to also be hosting. Please give Ted a hand. I apologize. At the Silicon Valley Education Foundation, we are, as Thea said, obsessed with preparing students for college and careers. And the events like this aren't just an event to hear some speakers and go home and ponder on it, but we do want these events to be change agents. We've brought together such wonderful panels on Common Core, but we also realize the enormity of the task in implementing these great standards in terms of teacher training, in terms of parent education, in terms of how we communicate to the general public and get philanthropic communities involved. We know not to undermine or underestimate the challenges ahead of us, so we hope that all of us can come together on those fronts. At the Silicon Valley Education Foundation, we will be committed to hosting these on a regular basis, forums such as these, to make sure that we understand where we're at, where we need to go as a community together versus disagree. There's lots of other states where they had too many public disagreements, which I hope California in general and Silicon Valley in particular is not one of them. And we have lots of great state leaders who will be on the panel who can tell us how to do that. We also have our Elevate Math program, which is an Elevate Science program, which is aligned to the Common Core standards. So this summer and during the next school year, we'll be working with math and science students to make sure they have the extra help they need, as well as teachers have an additional 40 to 50 hours of professional development they need to be successful. And we're happy to have Neil Finkelstein and the West Ed team in the audience today as well. Neil has done lots of great work in evaluating, making sure we continue to improve that product and program so more students can benefit from it across the Valley and across the state. Please join me in thanking Neil and the West Ed team as well. With that, we will get on with the show. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Manny Barbera. Manny is a wonderful, wonderful teammate at the Silicon Valley Education Foundation, a former superintendent in the Oak Grove School District, as well as many other significant roles in the Valley and in the state. And I'd like to invite him to introduce our panels. And before I do that, I have at least one of my many bosses in the audience, John Miller, who will also be on the panel. So we'll let go that he's not wearing a tie. And please, if you have anything bad to say, you can say it to everyone in the room except him. And we'll be okay with that. Join me in welcoming Manny Barbera.
Thank you, Mohammed. We're delighted to have you here today. One of our advocacy roles at the foundation is to bring issues of importance relative to education to the forefront for community conversation and discussion. In my 40 years in education, I think the Common Core standards are most likely the most significant change in the instructional area that at least I've ever seen. And we are now ready to start launching. So next year, it's going to be Common Core year. And so today we're sort of taking a temperature check and looking to see where we are as we begin to move forward. We have an outstanding set of panelists. We have two set of panelists for you. First one is going to be giving you the 30,000 foot perspective, right? Policy, statewide issues, how's it going from that perspective? The second one is more on the ground, right? The implementers, the one that have to deal with this on a day-to-day basis. So we hope that by the time you leave today, you have that perspective. So I would like to introduce the panelists right now and ask them to come up. And the format that we're going to have is each panelist is going to have up to 3 minutes to kind of give their comments about Common Core, except the first person that I'm going to introduce, the president of the State Board of Education, Mike Kirst, who is going to be giving us an overview of Common Core so that we have a sort of like a baseline that we all understand it. So please, first of all, Mike Kirst, president of the State Board of Education, please come on up. We're pleased to have with us from the State Assembly, Assembly Member Susan Bonilla. Susan? Susan, by the way, has been at the forefront at her particular interest is Our Schools Ready to deal with the technology needs. So we're very happy that you're able to join us here today. We have Mr. Common Core, one of the co-authors of Common Core. An honor to have him here again with us here, Phil Darrow. Phil, thank you so much for being here. Thank you. One of our board members at the Silicon Valley Education Foundation and someone who has been actively involved in supporting our advocacy for students completing the ADG requirements as a way to getting ready for college, John Miller. John, thank you for being with us here today. And last and certainly not least, representing the tens of thousands of teachers. How many teachers do we have in this state? 325,000 teachers. They could not all make it here today. So representing them, we are delighted to have with us the president of CTA, Dean Vogel. Thank you, Dean. And a distinguished moderator that we have for the first panel from the San Jose Mercury News, the editor of the editorial pages, Barbara Marshman. And thank you for being with us again, Barbara. So during this session, you may have some questions, right? So Barbara will be asking questions. So if you have questions, my colleagues, Bob and Mike Welch and Bob Nichols will have these cards, and you can just get their attention, write the question, and they will bring them up, and Barbara will be able to ask that question. So at this point, I will turn it over to Mike, who'll do his overview for Common Core, and then Barbara will take over after that. Thank you again for being with us.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Okay. All right, thank you for coming, and I look forward to a time with the panel, and I'm going to only take it about 10 minutes to try and give some framing remarks and give you a view from the state at this point. So if you look at Common Core, the themes of it have been fewer, higher, deeper in terms of standards. Standards are, of course, statements about what students should know and be able to do. They're not enough to really frame a curriculum around or what to do in a weekly basis in a school. So these standards then, fewer was part of it, was what Phil Darrow can talk about. The U.S. curriculum, when compared to others internationally, was characterized as a mile wide and an inch deep, and it repeated subjects, and it was really just too bulky for students to really handle. Higher means that the curriculum in California and the standards and the other attendant parts were not well linked to post-secondary education. We made the older standards without a lot of input from higher education, and they weren't looking up, and I include post-secondary education, career technical education, not just four-year education. So that was the need to really have a much cleaner, articulated flow of standards to align with post-secondary education. We see that, of course, with the huge numbers of remedial students at community colleges. And deeper, here are some words that I think summarize, verbs that summarize deeper. I think this is very much in tune with what Silicon Valley's looking for, and it goes well beyond memorization, and it goes heavily into application. So I think if you look at these are interesting, they're hard to assess, so we're working on an assessment which will do this, and they are very hard to implement. So if you take a curriculum which was often information transfer oriented, and you say, in addition, students need a lot of content, they need some understanding of basic facts and trends and things of that sort, but they also need this, then I think you get to look at the challenge to transform teaching with those 375,000 teachers to where they are feeling comfortable and effective to do this. So this is one way the state has been using to think about its policies, and this will I'll do a quick overview of where we are. So at the center are the standards, the English language arts and math, and I would say, and science standards as well. The State Board of Education adopted in its most recent meeting the next generation science standards. We are committed and hopeful and somewhat optimistic that we will be the national leading state in next generation science, but that's to come in the future. But if you take the Common Core standards there at the center, now you go to curriculum. Well, as I said, these were what students know and be able to do. So what is the content of the curriculum that would enable teachers to teach this, and what would be some suggested ways for them to think about it? That in California is called a curriculum framework. We have completed that in mathematics, and we're almost done with it in English language arts and math. Then you need instructional materials. In the past, textbooks, now much more flexible materials as well. We have endorsed instructional materials for the local level, and the locals can also now, with the deregulation of finance, buy their own materials. We're really advising them on what to buy, but we have made some recommendations. English language arts is on a slower track. And those materials will be adopted next year. And finally, we've really stepped up our game on the digital materials that we're looking at and endorsing. So the third part of the next one is state assessments. Obviously, if you have an all-new standards, you need all new assessments. We are part of a consortium with about 20 plus other states. The CST and the STAR testing system is history. The API system is gone, never to come back. The biggest losers may be the real estate agents, I don't know. We're coming in with all new assessments which are computer adaptive, meaning students will take harder questions. As they answer difficult questions, it'll take them up, it'll take them down if you're not doing so well, and they will have extended response and performance exams. So think about the difference between the driver's test when you take the multiple choice test, and then you actually have to go behind the wheel. So we're going to have a lot more behind the wheel testing than we've had in the past, which was almost none at the state level. So we're beginning to get, the assessments are in a phase, field test phase. In the next 3 weeks, we will begin, and we're all out in trying to stress the system really to see whether they can do this by computer in these next coming weeks. Principals and teacher policy, pre-service education, Cal State U and others are working on revamping pre-service education. The California Teacher Commission under Linda Darling-Hammond, who's the head of it, will be coming out with new approval criteria that are aligned to the Common Core. Professional development, this is the one that's really difficult. I think Dean can address this. I mean, Mohammed used the term 40 to 50 hours for professional development. How many people have had 40 to 50 hours of these 375,000 teachers? This is a huge lift. Obviously, we're doing some things. I'm not quite sure where we are on this in actually field area. Teacher evaluation, our view was to hold on this until we were folding in, until we were able to put Common Core on the ground. Other states like New York, they are doing all three at once. Common Core, teacher evaluation, all new accountability this year, bang. And they've run into a firestorm there. It's what I call overloading the policy system. People can't do everything at once, so we're more in a phase in there. Switching over to special education, we created a new task force to work on special education. It has not had a redo really in years. We weren't getting any good proposals on what to do with it. So we have a statewide task force funded by 3 California foundations. We are overhauling all of the assessments for special education. The so-called California Modified Assessment for Special Ed students is gone. Finance. Finance, as you know, we redid the formula and with special supplements for students. And we also have all districts working on a local control accountability plan. The Common Core is part of the items in the local control accountability plan, and it is also in our new multiple measure system for accountability. The old API was called an Academic Performance Index, but it only had one thing in it, tests. We're looking at moldable indicators, one of which will be for accountability, how well you've implemented Common Core. We also have flexible money coming there and $1.25 billion that the legislature and the governor appropriated for Common Core implementation in these other 2 years. English learners, for a long time there was a fight between a separate English learner curriculum and would it be merged with the English language arts curriculum. I think we have made progress in merging English learners with scaffolding into the English language arts curriculum content and merge them in effect all under the same standards banner, so we don't have these two separated. You're an EL and ELA, and those are separate standards. We used to have separate English learner standards. Those are gone too. Curriculum and technical education, we have a very large linked learning expansion, significant, which is, has internships and applied courses in high schools. And we are looking for, got an appropriation for the legislature for $250 million in new career technical programs that heavily involved industry through internships. So we're beginning to make some movement there. College readiness and higher education. We're going to be getting a lot of reinforcement from higher education. Both the SAT and the ACT will be completely overhauled in a major way to align with Common Core. So along with the CST gone, you can kiss the old SAT goodbye and the ACT. The SAT will unveil their new PSAT March 5th, and I've talked with the head of College Board, and he says I'm going to be happy, so I'll wait and see in terms of alignment with Common Core. ACT is offering a full battery of assessments for most all the grades. Some of the southern states are going with the ACT entirely. So if people are opposed to Common Core, they're going to be finding feedback from higher ed. Finally, University of California is recertifying high school courses to make sure they are aligned with the Common Core. So we have all this interaction with higher education that we never had before, and they're participating, higher education people, on the Smarter Balanced Assessment and Design. And finally, waivers and flexibility, we're granting those at the state level. So here's some things that I think will come up. Professional development, content, and delivery. I mean, this is a heavy lift. How far are we? I'm not quite sure. We're trying to, we're mounting efforts to find out. We need vast numbers of new materials. Teachers need to know how to move those, how to teach those, and how to work with those. That's a work in progress. The scale here is massive. 6.2 million children, 25% of which cannot function in English in the classroom. The technology infrastructure California, on a cost-adjusted basis, was 49th in spending in the nation before we passed our new finance law. A lot of the $1.25 billion is going to technology. Will it work? I don't know. In the coming months, we'll see. Some districts tried to use iPads and forgot they needed to use the keyboards. Will the computers get to LA after they spent $1 billion on iPads? Well, not the computers, but the boards for it. I don't know. Assessment of learning, I think we're pretty well on track on that, but the field test, we created 20,000 new items through the Smarter Balanced Assessment. This is huge. Alignment with higher education. Finally, communication to all stakeholders. All the polls have shown probably 10 to 20% of the public knows anything much about Common Core. We have a vast job. We have a letter that kids are going to take home about this new field test. You're not going to get a score this year, all of that, but that's just the beginning of a massive communication program that I think we'll be undertaking in part, but we still have no huge public campaign funded. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Michael, and welcome, panel. It's delightful to be here. We're going to go around now and give everyone an opportunity to say a few words just to start off, if there's something you'd like to say. If not, that's fine too. We'll have lots of questions here. Why don't we start out with Susan?
Great. And is this on? Perfect. Well, it's really a pleasure to be here. I was a high school English teacher in Contra Costa County at Concord High School. I want to salute all the teachers in the audience and thank you for taking it to the next level of advocacy for your students and the families. That's really why I ran for public office, and it works. So I just encourage you and thank you for what you are doing. It's been an incredible year. If I looked back into December of 2012, and when Superintendent Tom Torlakson brought me a bill about this new testing thing, and if I had any idea what it was going to involve, I probably would have taken longer to think about it. But as it was, I was like, yes, great idea, we should do this. So 9 months later, in September of 13, we had AB 484 signed by the governor. And of course, that's the bill that was mentioned by Mike here, getting rid of the STAR tests and bringing in the new assessments. That was an incredible opportunity to work on that bill. It was months of meeting with stakeholders and refining that bill from many different perspectives, and really, I think, embracing the message that we are in a transition period, and we need to give education breathing room in order to make this transition. Now, also, if I had known that we were going to take on Arne Duncan, I don't think I would have been as excited as the governor was at that possibility. But when it came right down to the very end of the bill, because it had been going along in different iterations, and at the very end, I got a call from the governor saying, oh, by the way, let's just get rid of the STAR completely, because we had kept in a few tests just to keep the feds happy. And I'm like, really? You're going to take them on? And he's like, it's the right thing to do. This is the right policy for the kids in California. Get rid of it. So once again, the bill was amended. I don't even count how many times that bill was amended, but it was the right decision. And I am really proud of the governor and the whole process, all the stakeholders, the legislature, all of those in the education community for getting behind that bill. Now, that's one topic we can talk more about. Other things that I've been working on very energetically has been STEM integration or STEAM integration. As an English teacher, you don't need to worry. I'm not going to forget the arts. I believe very strongly in that as part of our educational priority as well. But feel that it's very important that we're at a critical time right now where we've got to stop using the acronym and make it a reality in our classrooms. How do we do this? How do we implement the new tests, which, by the way, one of the most important functions of them, and the governor did put into his budget this year, the $45 million for the formative assessments. So it's not just the high-stakes end-of-year testing. The new testing is going to have a testing bank that teachers can draw on that's very, very critical and an important tool. And we had to push to get the whole package with the Department of Finance. I was chair for 3 years of the Education Budget Subcommittee, and that's why I was so focused on all this work. Also, the local control funding formula. We spent 6 months creating the space in our hearing process to have the conversation about that. Yes.
Could we move on for our 3-minute? And I'm sure we'll get back to lots of those questions. Phil, we were here about a year ago, I think, when this was still a battle, and now we're doing it, so.
Yeah, and then I talked about the problem with the U.S. curriculum compared to high-performing countries being how shallow it was and how wide. This is the mile wide, inch deep. I think Mike's talk, he covered so much ground in such a short time, and partly by talking fast, was if that he was teaching math, that would be an example of what mile wide, inch deep feels like for students. And I say that because it's not just what it looks like in the big fat book, and our books are bigger and fatter than they are in Japan by a long shot, but because it's about how fast we go through topics. Mile wide translates into too little time per topic, too little time per problem, and making the curriculum deeper, which is also higher, means slowing down, spending more time on each problem, spending more time on each topic, which required us, when we developed the standards, to have fewer topics and also to have a more focused treatment of each topic that remained. So a lot of what we cut out was within topics, not necessarily cutting out a topic, but for example, in fractions, we're asking teachers and kids to learn a lot less about fractions than they used to, but what they're learning builds on what they already know about whole numbers, and it's the foundation for algebra, so that creates more coherence. And that's what we were up to. But the mile wide, inch deep, also, we have to realize that we're doing it to ourselves. We've been shooting ourselves in the foot with a lot of bad habits we've had in this country. Aside from thinking that faster is better in math when it isn't, we also have a pedagogy which I call the ooh pedagogy in math. Teacher asks a question and kids raise their hand and go ooh, and teacher calls on one of them. It's not what you see in the Asian classrooms. There's no ooh. It's cold calls. The kids are like this, and the teacher decides who to call on because they want every student to be prepared to answer, but also because they don't want to create the impression that fast is smart. Many mathematicians will tell you they didn't know they were good in math. They thought they were bad in math until they got to some more advanced course in high school because they were slow. Mathematicians think. And the ooh is conveying the idea the faster you get the answer, the smarter you are. It's conveying the idea to the others that they're no good at math and encouraging them to quit. So I'm going to stop there. I know my time is up. So the big shift here is from when we call on a kid, treating the teacher as the audience, and the kid's idea is to say something so the teacher moves on to someone else, to shift to when the kid talks, he turns to his classmates and explains it so the classmates will understand. Not just barking out an answer, but explaining it so the classmates will understand. And that's one of the chief things you see that's different in the Asian classrooms from our own classrooms in mathematics. Those kids are standing up explaining math to each other during most of the period, whereas our kids are just trying to convince the teacher they're paying attention.
I can see lots of applications throughout life for the ooh factor, and I plan to steal it, thank you. Dean, what, oh, I'm sorry, we've
It's okay.
got John next. John
It's-
wasn't,
It's John Miller. Yeah, I have to first of all applaud everybody in this room. I think that you're at the vanguard of a revolution in education. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the effort of all of you here. I'm a businessman, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a capitalist, I'm not an academic, I'm not a teacher. I have 4 children. I'm a member of the Silicon Valley Education Foundation, even though I didn't wear a tie today. I know Mohammed's all about, decor and attire, but I say this in true candor. I am deeply concerned with the direction of education in this country, and particularly in Santa Clara County. I have shared this anecdote many times. When I walk to my place where I work out at noon every day, I walk through St. James Park in San Jose, and the proliferation of homeless and just the social sort of degradation that I see on a daily basis that's occurred over the last 20 years is startling and scary. So if there's one thing that I can do as a member of the business community, involving my time and effort through the foundation and also through my own efforts to create a coalition of academics, of people within government, people within the business community, also with tech companies here in Silicon Valley to create a true dedication to improving education across the board in our great state, but more particularly with Santa Clara County. So my involvement is as a private citizen, as a business member of the business community, and I'm actually spearheading the initiation and adoption with Manny of the A to G curriculum in the remaining high school districts here in Santa Clara County. Made a commitment to this initiative, and I'm just honored to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Dean.
And yes, I'm honored to be here as well, and I love seeing a room full of folks with this same focus around the Common Core. And I want to say one thing right off the bat that I heard down the road. You know, it's about being slower. It's about being more deliberate. It's about being more thoughtful. And think about that from a policy view. If we're really supposed to be looking from 30,000 feet, like we heard Manny say, it's not a race. It's not a race to the top. What this is this is an opportunity for us to work collaboratively together, all stakeholder folks, to find out what's really best for kids in these classrooms. So think about that. You talk about kids in classrooms, the very first place you got to go to is the quality of the teaching force and the instructional materials that are available to them. And we heard the chair of the State Board of Education tell us that we've just now adopted the math textbooks. Very few people sitting in this room have seen them yet. Yet we're already working to develop curriculum. We haven't seen the materials that we're going to be using. That's a predicament. That's a policy problem. We're not going to see the language arts curriculum until sometime next year or even later. So we got some serious work to do. One of the things that we know is that when you bring the practitioner, that's the teacher or the person supporting the teacher in the classroom, when you bring those people to the center of the work around implementing the Common Core, incredible things can happen. It would be such a gift to all of us if that's what was happening statewide. And I know there's going to be another panel that's going to talk specifically about implementation. But let me tell you what I'm hearing from teachers around the state. Some folks are saying, oh my God, this Common Core, this is what I've been doing under the radar for the last 15 years. For crying out loud, somebody finally understands pedagogically what has to happen with kids in classrooms. Thank you. You know, it's interesting. Many of those folks come from districts where 2 or 3 years ago, district management and teachers and union stakeholders in the community came together and said, look, we got to figure out how to get this done. How are we going to go about it? And it wasn't like somebody telling somebody else. It was like an us thing, and it was very thoughtful and very deliberate. And we've got districts around the state where they've been developing curriculum around the Common Core for 2 or 3 years already. And when you walk into those buildings, those teachers are saying, let's get on with it. I'm ready. On the other hand, we've got districts where there was no collaborative effort at all. Things were pretty much happening in the district office, and I'm going to say under the best of intentions, but teachers didn't even know about it until, if they were lucky, last spring. And if they were not too lucky, sometime this past fall, were told in a faculty meeting, okay, stop all that, now we're doing the Common Core, and they were handed something. And I will tell you, those people are not too excited about the Common Core. And I'd love to talk about that later.
Actually, Dean, why don't we stay with that? The president of the NEA has pretty much come out against Common Core in a memo to all its members. Is there that kind of sense
Yes,
in the CTA?
let me just pick up that thread. He's not against the Common Core, he's against the way we're implementing it. Because if we're racing to get it done, think about the culture we've developed. And by the way, we've all been complicit in developing this culture over the last 10 or 15 years, not only in this state, but around the country, that says, you got to get it done, you got to get it done quickly, and you got to get done with less money and less resources, so let's get on with it. And what's happened implementation-wise, not only around the country, but around the state, where I already heard New York being referenced as a disaster, is that I pointed to two ends of the continuum. Collaboration, already 3 years in the development, faculties at the building level understanding conceptually what they're trying to get done, and the conversation focused on the pedagogy and the practitioner being the decision maker on one end, and on the other end, the faculties basically being disregarded, being told by the folks who know better what to do, and that's certain, with all due respect, I say management teams, but that's not necessarily what it is. It's just people outside of the classroom, outside of the building, folks working with consultants or people from outside. No disrespect to West Ed, who's a great partner with us and do a lot of this work. But what happens when you're doing the hardest job in the world, and if you're a classroom teacher in this room, I'm talking to you and you know it, and the only people that understand how hard you work are you, because most of the folks haven't been in your shoes and they think it's a pretty easy thing to teach with less and less and less, being asked to do more and more and more. And so these people that want you to just say, okay, now what do you want me to do? They're not expecting you to think, they're expecting you to do. So I just gave you two ends of a continuum. And what's happening in the state of California is all over that. And what NEA is finally saying, after I've been beating on them for 5 years, is, it's time for us to stand up and say, look, if you want to implement something and you want to do it appropriately and you want to make something good for kids, put it in the hands of the practitioner. Give them a voice in the process.
By the way, I agree that teaching is hard. I studied education, I student taught, and that's why I'm a journalist today. I think this is a really important point, and I don't want to encroach on the next panel, but I wonder if anyone else here would like to address the way this is being handled in the schools here, particularly Santa Clara, San Mateo County. We have more children in these schools than a lot of states have. How are we going about this? Who would like to jump in?
I will. I've done workshops in these counties, did one 2 weeks ago, with teachers and with math leaders. And at the ground level, when you talk to teachers about what to teach and what kids learn, the Common Core is pretty well received. They see it as being more rational, making more sense, and so on. They're worried about this superstructure of testing-based accountability and all of that stuff. But in their minds, as long as it's about what we're teaching and what the kids have to learn, it makes sense. And they're taking steps. Teacher knowledge of mathematics is an existing problem. It wasn't created by the Common Core. In the old tradition, the way we handled the deficiencies in our teacher preparation program and our teacher PD programs was to just flunk kids. And we flunked very large numbers of kids out of our systems, as Neil's report on pathways show. Very high percentages of kids never make it through the college readiness sequence. The Common Core has reframed the problem so that teacher knowledge is now a problem that we're supposed to solve by increasing the teacher knowledge, not by flunking kids. And so that's what the shift is. And how we deal with that problem is really, I think, going to determine how successful this whole thing is. And to me, it's going to be a mistake, and this is going to echo Dean's point, to try to reach the end in 1 or 2 years. We need to set up a process where teacher knowledge of mathematics increases each year they teach, which is how they do it in Asia, and not worry so much about getting there in 1, 2, or 3 years. Increase each year, and we'll start getting the benefits of that increase immediately.
Thank you. Susan, did you want to say something about that?
Well, it wasn't a local answer, but I think in terms of the state perspective about Common Core, if you talk to teachers, I think one of the most troubling things for a teacher is the lack of support. And that's why last year it was so critical, and I advocated throughout the entire legislative budget cycle there for what turned out to be $1.25 billion that was sent out in one-time funding to support our classrooms. And it was very broadly sent out. It was per pupil amount, about $220 per pupil. And it went out for professional development, for curriculum, for really whatever the classrooms and the schools needed. We're in that situation again. Probably one of the most important things this year is I have a bill that's AB 2319, just entered it last Friday. It's asking for, it doesn't have a number in it because everyone would be horrified, but I'm asking for $1.5 billion again, because for us to be successful in any of this, we have to put our money where our mouth is. We have to support the process here, and the way the state has to support it is financially.
Let me just say something about this point about the 1.25 billion, because I agree, it was a phenomenal effort, and Susan showed incredible leadership. But understand this, what a lot of districts are doing with that 1.25 billion is not providing professional learning opportunities for teachers. What they're doing is they're buying the hardware necessary to be ready to deal with computer adaptive assessments. And so here's what happens. Everything comes back on the back of the practitioner. Besides the teacher being left out of the decision, of pedagogical decisions around what the curriculum should be, they're also being told that they got to figure it out, because what we had anticipated were going to be professional learning opportunities just aren't there. Now, that's not a blanket statement for everybody, because I know there are districts where it really is happening, where teachers are being afforded the opportunity for professional learning, but that is not the model for all.
The technology is necessary, right?
Absolutely.
So,
Well, Susan made the great point. I mean, we need more money.
okay, that's, that's what I thought.
That's what it always is.
A question probably for Mike from Ruth Davidson of Teachers on Reserve. In your state policy alignment strategy, there's no mention of meeting the needs of gifted or academically advanced students. When will the needs of those students be taken into consideration?
Yeah, first of all, I did want to reinforce, Dean, that I do not think the NEA has come out against Common
Yeah,
Core. They have
that's
come
right.
out against the flawed and overly rushed policy overload implementation in some states like New York, which is a big media center. And they have also, made comments at NEA that California is generally on the right track in terms of our phasing. I think if you look at those verbs I put up, you will see what a lot of students that are, quote, in gifted programs have been wanting to do and should be able to do, but have really, in many ways, been subject to a more uniform curriculum that doesn't push these sort of things. So I would say that is really. I don't believe they're not being addressed. I don't believe that you need a program categorical for gifted. We had over 60 of those categorical programs at one point. The disease set in called hardening of the categories. They all hardened into small numbers. There was something for gifted, I remember, over the years, token amount. Everybody declared victory. We've taken care of the gifted. We're trying to put it into the center and the core of the curriculum. I think it's there. I think if you look at a performance exam, which takes a complex issue like nuclear power and says, bring together a number of sources and analyze this, and just don't give me your opinion, show where this comes from, that all is the kinds of things that people were pushing in gifted education. Finally, our assessment is going to find out what some of these so-called gifted pupils really know, because it is computer adaptive. It's going to go up harder and harder. And a lot of these students topped out on the ceiling of the existing tests. We've taken the ceiling off. So I don't agree with the comment.
Okay. I have a question for John. if you go on the conspiracy theory sections of the internet, and I would say I've been surprised, we've gotten letters from local teachers as well, that there is this belief out there that Common Core is an invention of the business community to somehow defeat intellectualism and make everybody, ready for the workforce. I wouldn't bring it up if I didn't hear about it fairly regularly, and I'd be interested to hear you react to it and also tell us how businesses participate
I
in
love
this.
conspiracies.
Yeah, me too.
Wow. Wow. I would say just the opposite. That's sort of Machiavellian at its roots. I was going to comment in the integration and implementation of Common Core, a little bit digressing from your question for a second. That is a perspective held by the business community that there's inefficiency. And one of the problems that I see is that there's a failure of communication, and there's a failure of communicating how complex the integration of Common Core is in our district. And so it's incumbent upon everyone within the industry to, I think, be much more forthcoming in how you actually implement this and what the challenges are. Because I think there's a large constituency of people like myself who have kids, who are having kids, who are concerned about, my God, is my kid going to be able to compete? Are they going to be able to perform with this new curriculum when you have the professionals that are not even given the opportunity to get their head around the material? So that's a message that definitely needs to be communicated to the business community and to everyone at large. To answer the question about the conspiracy, that's complete hogwash. No
That I
question
knew.
about it. No, absolutely not. What we do want to see, what I want to see in my company, I'm sure every tech company, Microsoft, you name it, every tech company in Silicon Valley, every business in Silicon Valley, every business in California, they want to have highly qualified folks to hire. Is that going to be satisfied by Common Core? I hope. Is it going to be satisfied by my thing as A to G? I hope. Do kids need to go to college? Not necessarily, but do they need to be able to solve a problem and think cognitively? Absolutely. Common Core, I think, would do that. So this idea that somehow the business community is behind this is, in my humble opinion, is completely baseless.
Thank you. I have a question from Roberto Gil from Sacred Heart. How will Common Core align with the needs for English learners? Will there have to be substandards for English learning students, or will that be part of the integration that you talked about, Mike?
It will be part of the integration. As I indicated, at one point we had separate standards, but this is going to be extremely hard to do. I mean, we have an integrated sequencing from English Learner into the high ends of the English language arts standards, but it really I think is challenging, and whether we can do that in the time we have, in school of 180 days and sometimes less in some districts, without more time. One of the things I didn't have on my wheel that I wish I'd had was after-school programs, summer programs. We have a lot of money in after-school programs here, and a lot of it is not well aligned to the Common Core. So I think we need to think about that as well. Maybe, Phil, you want to comment on it from the math standpoint?
Yeah, and by the way, there's a website that's at Stanford called Understanding Language, which Carnegie funded to deal with this very question of what's the Common Core impact on EL students and how to deal with that, and it's a good website. One of the things we learned in talking to people from especially these high-performing Asian countries, when I say high-performing, I'm speaking specifically about in mathematics, because it's not general. One of the things that was kind of stunning was they don't share our view that that the American system is one of the worst in the world. They study us all the time, and most of their good ideas are ideas they got from us. That's right. In fact, one of the guy in Singapore said the secret pill, the magic pill you're looking for is just do what you say, because that's what we do. If you just did what you said, it would get results. And in EL, almost all the techniques, teaching techniques and learning techniques, involve slowing down. And when you watch lessons in Singapore where all the kids are EL, because they teach in English, you'll see that the lessons go at a slower pace than we're used to. And they bring the kids' own thing. The kids are producing explanations, not just answers. And they're producing them in their second language. So their language development is happening as part of their math learning.
Did you want to say something, student? No. Okay. Let's go back to New York for a minute. It seems like one of the lessons there, well, maybe I will just generally ask, what are some of the things, other than not doing everything at once, that we can learn from New York? But I'm particularly thinking about the public backlash. Apparently, there is no money yet for real public outreach. I have a sense that if I weren't doing what I'm doing for a living, I might not really know all this is going on. What is that a challenge, getting parents to expect that, for instance, scores will change?
I was going in a different place when I raised my hand.
Okay.
So, but let me just tell you, when you said New York, California is one of 5 states that didn't jump to the trough and buy into Race to the Top. We said, excuse me, we have a hunch, we know what to do, and we're not playing. And New York was one of the states that jumped in. And so when you think about, pick a state, New York, Tennessee, Florida, Ohio, all these places where it's just kind of coming unraveled right now, what they had to do based on the mandates from the feds and Race to the Top, they had to evaluate teachers based on test scores, which means they had to have a testing system in place immediately. You know, they had to figure out how to deal with seniority issues in the contract. So a lot of the mess that they got into wasn't about the Common Core. It was about the mandates that they had to meet for the feds for this Race to the Top, and also for the waiver to the NCLB. Okay? And but this issue that you bring about helping to communicate to parents, and I heard that from a couple other folks. John said a very incredible thing right at the end of his very first statement. He said, I have deep concern about the direction of public education in this county. And I'll tell you what, that's true for everybody in this room. And you could also just cross out county and put state, or cross out state and put country. There's deep concern about what's happening because we spend way too much time drawing lines in the sand and throwing rocks at each other depending on what side we're on. But in California, it's different. We've got leadership in the State Board of Education that basically is respectful of the professional and the practitioner and understands in order to be effective, you got to bring labor and management together in a collaborative effort. Look at the Greatness by Design report that just came out, 2 years ago. We've got legislative leadership that understands you got to go slow enough and you've got to fund it and you've got to have the right kind of policy in place to support communities coming together. We've got a governor that's saying the same thing. So if ever there was an opportunity for a state to get it right, it's here. And that's what we should be talking to the communities about. We should be talking about the opportunity we have, all for one and one for all, and we're not doing enough of that.
Anybody else want to comment?
Yeah,
I think it's
I'll
important.
just say that we have money, and you'll see something coming up soon, which will be a communication campaign to educators for them at the local level, then to inform parents and the groups in the school. So there is a plan to go through the educators. Ted Lempers, who's here, is working through community organizations. What we don't have is the kind of big public communication campaign you do in a political campaign, a multi-million-dollar thing. So far, there's no funding for that, and nobody has really stepped up to the plate, and we're worried about it.
Can I say something about that?
Sure.
To address Mike and Dean, I think those are great points. And again, it's about communication. And one of the problems that I see is that we're the recipients of billions of dollars, and we have a new curriculum, but you're not communicating how that's going to get implemented effectively with your constituency. And that's the problem that people have. They go, oh, more taxpayer dollars. We've got a big subsidy now from the feds through the state, and the Santa Clara County District gets $70 million, but no one knows how to implement it. That's the biggest problem. So if you can, Mike, if you can actually implement some sort of public campaign to educate all of us, I think you would find that the implementation of Common Core in embracing what the teachers need in order to get their head around and teach the curriculum effectively would be a successful PR campaign. But someone needs to do that.
I agree, and I think everyone knows the scores are going to be somewhat shocking and disturbing if people aren't prepared. They're going to be
Yes.
lower. And there are people who are sitting around waiting for that event to put their own spin on it, to exploit it. And we shouldn't be the last ones trying to figure out how are we going to explain to the public why the scores are lower.
Yeah, well, the other states have communication campaigns, they don't fit us. They're all about fighting the Tea Party and the opposition. So we're not, we don't have a big Tea Party here. And we don't have a lot of opposition. The Republican Party came out at their convention against Common Core. But so far, ours really needs to be, this is coming and here's what you need to know. And so we're not getting as much help from this national level because, again, we're unique, as we always are, and I guess every state is, but that's been troubling.
Here's another good question about a sort of different level of communication. What should be done to make sure new teachers are competent in math and understand how elementary math relates to higher math to be able to jump in and deal with Common Core? It's one thing to retrain folks who are here now, those who need it, but is this going down into the San Jose State level?
But I'd have to tell a story. I was doing a workshop with teachers. A young teacher came up afterward and said, I'm hearing all about the shift from the way it was to the Common Core, but I've only been teaching 2 years and all I've ever known is the Common Core. What was it before the Common Core? And so this, we replace our teaching force pretty fast.
Yeah.
Or at least the 50% of it. We have a system which isn't so rational for preparing teachers in this country. In mathematics, the teachers get their mathematics training before they enter teacher prep programs. And so it's the math departments of San Jose State and everywhere else that have to have coherent programs for future teachers, even though the kids don't necessarily know they're future teachers. Most of the math courses you take as a math major are not about what you teach in K-12. They're about the topics that come after K-12. When you look at a place like Japan or Singapore, they spend the 4-year, their undergraduate years studying the mathematics more deeply that you're going to be teaching when you get to a teacher. Our teachers, the last time they studied fractions was in 6th grade.
That's right.
You don't study fractions when you take math courses at the university.
Any other comments on that? I think it is a big concern. A couple of questions on vocational education. One of them, Henriette Langdon from San Jose State. In your planning, I don't see vocational education as a goal. Now, I know, Michael, you mentioned that we would be getting to it, but is there going to be an emphasis for kids who don't want to go to college but may excel in another area that will lead them to a good career? Is that going to be built in some way, or will that be a separate track of some kind?
We don't know. I mean, I think that's an area that is still, as I indicated, where we're experimenting rather than having a clear roadmap as to how we're going to phase it in, and what exactly the area will be. The Common Core was, college and career ready, but it was not carefully delineated how the career differed from the college. And I think that we have to be honest that wasn't there. Indeed, I wrote them a letter once saying that it's not clear how you're doing this.
And if I could just quickly interject, because I've been talking to some folks in the vocational community about funding for next year. Often it's a matter of dealing with dropouts or preventing dropouts who are not engaged by today's curriculum or, I suspect, by some of the Common Core. Will that be part of the discussion?
It's certainly part of the discussion, and maybe Susan wants to talk about it in terms of the legislation that went through. So it's part of it. you immediately get into, I mean, the discussion gets bogged down quickly when you say, okay, you're in a track that does not put you into A to G that allows you to go to a 4-year school. So I've got you going this way, and you'll never get back. And so there's a lot of pushback. Many civil rights groups see this as a very strong civil rights effort. On the other hand, the legislature was presented some year under the prior governor with a view that, well, let's make the college A to G curriculum the default curriculum and put everybody in that. And the legislatures felt that that was too one size fits all and didn't meet what you're asking. So I don't see that we've been able to develop a political consensus around it. And it's an area that I think we're still very much is a work in progress in that regard. So that's all I can say at this
Anybody
point.
else
You
have
wanna-
thoughts?
I would say that there's very strong support in Sacramento for career technical education. We funded it last year. This year, I think one of the issues in front of us with the budget is ROP programs. And there will be, I think, some really specific delving into making sure with doing away with our categoricals, we know we made programs vulnerable. And ROP programs are one of those. And so that is going to continue on as a discussion. And when we're talking about career technical education, it resonates. I think, though, that we have to see it also, this is one of the struggles with local control. And then the tension of the state's role. And then what does an individual community want? And what are their decisions going to be at that board level, school board level? So I think it's out there, it's undecided, but it's something that, as all these issues, needs vocal advocacy.
And I was going to say, we are all victims of the runaway train that was this crazy test-based, score as high as you can, keep running, runaway train. And what that train did is it ran over all of these vocational education programs. And we saw state-of-the-art auto shops dismantled and the equipment sold off so that we could put together 4 or 5 mathematics classrooms so we could take the kid who couldn't get math and was hating it and just give him another math class instead of auto shop. That's what we did over the last 10 or 15 years. And what's starting to live in communities, and Susan just started to speak about it, the narrative that's starting to build in Sacramento is, where to remember the oops. I love that. The oops. You know, here's an oops for us. We blew it. You know, when we had the opportunity as part of a comprehensive high school program to give kids the chance to see how they feel about and how they interact with some of these other trades. And you look at these high-performing countries, like I spent 8 days in Finland 2 years ago walking through all these schools, and every single comprehensive school had state-of-the-art metal shop, wood shop, electronics, textiles, art, that kids started dealing with in 3rd grade. So by the time they hit 15 and had to decide, do they do university track and head to the gymnasium, or they do labor track and head to the practicum? And it wasn't a test score that decided, it was a family that decided, based on what our kid has experienced, this is where we want to go. And we have lost that here, and we got to get it back.
On the question of what the Common Core did for the career and technical education, I would give us a B-. I wouldn't give it, we made it better. It's better than it was in the old state standards. But we didn't take the problem on directly, as Mike said. We were given as a condition the same math curriculum for all students, because everybody had to be college ready, which isn't real. And I think the way we have to reframe this conversation, which is very hard to have because of the social justice, civil rights issues, who decides who gets to go to college and who doesn't, is what people are worried about. One way of reframing it is other countries don't have placement. They have options, and students pick their options. Right. And it's usually at 15, but really at age 14, because you have to qualify. So around age 14, you decide whether you want to go to a polytechnic institute, which will be a first-rate polytechnic education, or you want to go to a liberal arts college, or you want to be a STEM major and be a physicist or engineer. So you have to make that choice. We pretend that choice never has to be made in this country. And a lot of the kids who would have had the option of going to polytechnic here, the only real option we offer them is dropping out. So if you look at it as what's better, polytechnic or dropping out, it's obvious. But if you look at it from the who decides who gets to go to college, it's not so obvious. It's a difficult conversation to have, but we need to have it.
And I think we need to think more broadly about career technical education. A lot of times when I'm referring to, integrating STEM, it's about academies that might be focused on medical technician work or all the other careers that are out there. So we need to broaden it beyond the auto shop to realize that there are many, many job fields that have that next level of training, but we can help kids get that jump start and find what their passion is if it isn't the physicist route.
I'll just, since there's some interest in this, call attention to an op-ed that posted a little while ago on mercurynews.com/opinion by Bob Hennessy of the Conservation Corps and Charter School in San Jose, saying that their money to do a lot of the work they do with formerly incarcerated kids and dropouts is going away. Just toss that out, Susan.
It's true.
Yeah, it's a shame. But I understand
Well,
your
let
choices.
me, can I address that for a second?
Sure.
I mean, it's what I said when I opened with my introduction was I walk through St. James Park every day, and the proliferation of homeless it's extraordinary just in 10 years. I'm a huge believer in having career tracks. I mean, I think I echo a lot of people in the business community. I mean, we want to have a vibrant community. We want to have a community with high self-esteem. We want people to have a living wage. You want to have vibrancy in your community. It's not everyone's going to go to college. So I would think that at the state level, at the sort of legislative level, that has got to be, I think, accepted as reality. And it's clear, a 4-year education going to Berkeley or going to SC or UCLA or Stanford, it's not getting what you used to get. So it's reevaluating, what you actually get out of spending all the money, the student debt load and all of that, that's burdening tons of kids and tons of families. But it all goes back to everyone in this room who's basically forming our children's ideas and their capacity to perform as citizens in this country. Whether they go to college or whether they go have a career, go to Polytechnic and have something that can provide for their family eventually is the goal. But it fundamentally comes down to you. So where I sit is you need to, through Dean, who was actually quite, my God, you're so articulate. That's actually a compliment. It's this is what I like to hear. I don't hear this very often. You hear so much bad press about the unions, right? And it doesn't matter. We live in liberal Northern California. I spend most of my career time in Southern California. And I mean, I'm speaking personally, but it's incumbent upon all of us to get the message out. And I think Dean and Mike are great examples of the idea and the integrity of it.
I've just been handed a follow-up to this discussion. How do we get the ELA and math, I guess that's English Language Arts,
Yeah.
and math, I need a primer on and Common Core standards into courses such as auto shop and other vocational courses, so kids get what they need in a setting they want to be in?
One way to deal with that question is just look at the chair of the State Board of Education and the legislative leadership and say, figure it out, and that's kind of what we've been acquiescing to. And the fact of the matter is, you give a faculty in a high school that challenge, and they will make it happen, and they will get it done effectively, but they've got to be in it, and they've got to be immersed in it, and they've got to have the opportunity to have all of the data. The other thing is it's not just a faculty acting alone. It's a faculty that has a principal who's an instructional leader. And the instructional resources at the district level to be able to help them. We have an opportunity in this state through the collaborative effort, bringing everybody together to really be the lighthouse for the rest of the country. I believe we're going to get there. And that's an excellent question, excellent example. You know, the practitioners will get it done, but they have not been given the opportunity to lead, and they need to.
We already have what the question's about. It's called linked learning. If you go into Google and a search engine, put linked learning California, you'll find exactly what the question has. The Irvine Foundation has poured a ton of money into this. It's headquartered out of Berkeley. And it has spread across the state through some state grants from the legislature passed. So we know how to do it. We are doing it. The rub there is that the linked learning folks who have been so active and have such a really good model as how to infuse these things, they still want students to satisfy requirements for post-secondary education. So they have not done, and what Phil was talking about in these other countries, where you stream at 15 under linked learning and you'll never be able to go back to a four-year school. Part of the answer in which we have largely failed in the past is linking high school better to community college career tech. I do not believe we're going to be able to restore all these wonderful facilities in every high school. In fact, I'm not sure we should. Our ROP is a regional occupation program. I think it should be done regionally. We had a program that the Clinton administration and others called Tech Prep. You did the first parts of your tech in college, and it went seamlessly into in high school. First parts of your tech program in high school, it went seamlessly into the community colleges. We've been in California, broken apart between K-12 and community colleges that we could never make the agreements of even credit transfer work. So part of this answer has to be involving the community colleges, which after all do have the high-class equipment. I go to high schools and some of that stuff looks like it ought to be in the Smithsonian attic. You go to the community college, it looks like the inner office of a major industrial operation. So for us to duplicate all that equipment here, it's going to be, I think, very unlikely. So we need to be creative in thinking about that. So somebody has to get together with the community colleges.
We have probably time for one more question, and I have one here from Rachel Reinhardt at Berkeley that I'd like to elaborate on a little bit. She says, how should teachers think about content standards and reading and writing in history classes under Common Core? And I'll expand that to bringing in the arts and other things that are not part of the math science core that we're also concerned about, but get to the creativity and understanding of our culture that also is essential to a creative tech community.
Well, we can't do the Common Core without the other subjects being an integral part. If we're going to do various performance exams, the historical field of looking at history and different ways of considering history, different perspectives on it is really a good way to do this. So deeper looking at sources. We don't have enough time in English language arts and math to build those verbs in that I talked about in two subjects. So bridging in history is really, and other subjects, including art, is very important. If you look at those verbs and you look at them, a lot of them have artistic nature to them. Model, construct, and derive various things, and be able to transfer knowledge. Phil, why don't you take your comments on it because you worked on it.
Yeah, and I think the ELA standards, in ways more obvious than in the mathematics standards, shift away from just thinking about what the student receives and are quite explicit about the sorts of things kids produce, are expected to learn how to produce. And in describing what they have to learn how to produce, they're complex productions. What they're writing has to meet complex criteria. These are higher order types of productions. And those sorts of things aren't going to come out of just the teaching in English class. history, art, and so on. In math, it's the same way. It's just more, it's not as easy to recognize. And certainly in science. And producing written work, producing discourse, talk, as well as listening and reading.
Anyone else on that?
Yes. In the olden days, you know, who knows where that was? Everybody's kid was everybody's business. You know, like if I was in trouble in a neighborhood, in some other neighborhood I didn't live in, by the time I got home, my parents knew. Because everybody's kid was everybody's business. And what's happened over the course of time is we've developed this fragmented way of looking at kids and activity and each other. And what happens in a school that's really working, and you people that are working in them know it, in a school where you've got the kind of instructional leadership necessary to really build a pedagogical environment that you have to make things better for kids, what happens is everybody's kid is everybody's business. And that happens either at the primary school, that can happen at the secondary school. And when you've got that kind of climate, you've got that kind of culture, and you've got that kind of commitment to one another, then these questions are just easy. They're just more, it's what we all engage in making happen. And again, it just comes right back to the opportunity we have here in California at this point in time. I mean, it's our time. It's our time.
That is a wonderful conclusion, unless I cut off anyone else who wanted to say something. I think that really sums up the opportunity. Got a lot of good answers here, and I'm at least encouraged that there are a lot of very smart people working on this. Thank you, panel.
Thank you, Barbara and panel. And we're going to take a stretch break as we're going to get started at 3:20 on the spot. And again, I want to thank all of you for a terrific panel. Let's give them another hand. Thank you very much. And the second panel can come on up here anytime.
Hey, I saw you. Yeah, I know. We're gonna get a quick picture.
Yeah, let's get a photo. get started in just a minute. If everyone can find your seats, please. We're going to go ahead and get started in just a second here, so if everyone can please find their seats. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to start by introducing the panel. So you've heard from some individuals at the statewide level. Now we're going to get to the ground floor here and hear from people who have to implement and put the Common Core into action. And let me start off, first of all, by thanking the panel for being with us here today. Am I missing somebody there? Oh, here comes Manny right here. There we go. All right. So let me introduce the on-the-ground panel and let you know who we have with us here today. So at the far end, we have from the Evergreen School District, a teacher and coach at Catherine Smith Elementary, Ryan Hanson-Vera. And if you want to see something really terrific, go visit Catherine Smith School. I had a chance to go visit there a couple of weeks ago. They're doing some fabulous, fabulous work there in project-based learning. So I'm glad to be here with us. We have from the Campbell High School District from Westmont High School, the department chair, Wendy Lawson. Wendy, thank you for being here. Wendy has been right at the ground floor with leading the work in not only in Campbell, but also with the articulation with the feeder districts known as the Campbell Consortium. So thank you for being here, Wendy. We have with us so we have a couple of teachers from their perspective, one at the high school level, one at the elementary level. And then we also have a principal, not only a principal, but a new principal in his first year. So he's just kind of bridging both worlds. Manny Villapando from Frost Elementary in Oak Grove School District. Manny, thank you for being here. And then we also wanted you to hear from the superintendent perspective. So we're delighted to have with us two outstanding superintendents. One, the superintendent from the East Side High School District, over 26,000 high school students, Chris Funk. Chris, thank you for being with us. And from the elementary perspective, leading the Cupertino Elementary School District, Wendy Godalowitz. And thank you for being with us here, Wendy. Thank you. So they're going to get started and take a couple of minutes to either react to what they heard, just comment about the Common Core. And while you're doing that, I'll just throw out just a general question to kind of keep in the back of your mind. How prepared do you feel with the Common Core coming up next year? You've kind of heard, sort of at the state level, kind of what's going on. You could be honest, be confidential here. No one else will pay attention to it. But seriously, as you say a few words, and I'm going to ask Wendy to kind of get started with just generally, how do you feel the district is ready? This has been a big task as you kind of move forward. So, Wendy?
These aren't on. There it goes. I think it's a great question, and I was thinking about it before coming in, and the question is, how ready are you? And I don't know that anybody could really have an answer to that question, because there are still so many things you heard earlier about all of the things that are still unknown. And I think with the question about the questions about the lack of materials, the questions about are we ready with our technology, all those things wrapped up creates a sense of how ready can you be? I think from our perspective in our district, we're ready for the challenge, that I know. We're ready with our teachers. I think we're one of those districts, earlier where we were talking about, do you collaborate or do you not collaborate? We're one of those districts who are actually engaging in that teacher collaboration. But what we're finding is that our teachers are ready for the challenge, but at the same time, they're saying, can you just give us something? So it's not, we want to create everything, but can you at least give us something to start with? And I think that would help us be a little more ready if we had some of those materials ready at our fingertips, but that's been a struggle for us. So what we've been attempting to do is to wrap our arms around those questions and provide resources for our teachers in ways that they can feel a little more comfortable. And we've taken one strategy with both our parents and our teachers around that, and that is to create live binders for them. And so what that means is all of our resources are set in a single place for our parents and for our teachers. For our teachers, it's by grade level and by the content. We started with math, so a second grade teacher can click in, have links to resources, have links to assessment sites, internal and external resources all in one place. And we've done the same thing for parents because it's been really tough for parents to stay ahead of the game, and in our district that's important. So with math, we started with our live binders, and they have mathematical tasks they can do with their children there. They have links to the state standards. They have links to resources within the district and again outside of the district. I think we're ready for the challenge, but answering that question about how ready are we exactly to launch is a difficult question.
John's question. So I'm going to skip over Chris because I'm going to save you till the end. So Manny, let you give your 3 minutes.
On the school level, I believe that my teachers are ready in regards with the right mindset. I'm very fortunate to have a teaching staff that is willing to embrace the challenges ahead, and they have this idea that we are going to do this with the interest of meeting the needs of our students. The challenge is we are undoing what we've done for the last 15 years. And so that looming task of what kind of score is going to evaluate us, what is going to be the bottom line, has been probably the thing that I've had to work the hardest with, and trying to get my teachers to feel confident that, in their teaching abilities, and feel confident in the products that they're going to build, and that this is a process of progress, not perfection. And really, we're going to be moving and trucking along, and I know as we're making each of these incremental steps, my staff is ready. I don't know if they're completely prepared, but they're ready for the challenge and have the right mindset, which I told them that's what we have to have.
Okay. Wendy?
So where are we? Campbell Union High School District is a little bit different in that I keep hearing people are going to do Common Core next year. We're testing our 11th graders this year, and so we decided, well, gosh, if we're testing our students this year, maybe we should start trying to transition towards implementation this year. So I am currently teaching an integrated math course 1 based completely on the Common Core state standards. And that's true across my high school district and across our feeder districts. We've been articulating with the feeder districts, and they understand that what used to be 8th grade algebra needs to be similar to our integrated math course 1. And so that's been happening this year. So it's weird for me to hear all about people talking, oh, this is what we're going to do next year. We're phasing it in. Integrated Course 1 happened this year. Integrated Course 2 is going to happen next year. Integrated Course 3 is going to happen the year after that. Articulation continues with the feeder schools because we are struggling with acceleration pathways and remediation options as we move forward in this process. And we do feel like we're a little bit of a step ahead of the published materials. We self-published a workbook for our students in Integrated 1 this semester. I came from the district office today where we had a release day for our Integrated Math 1 teachers to continue to build those resources because there are a lot of resources out there, the live binder type with links to things that are already there, but we are having to go very much beyond the curricular resources that we've had for the past 15 years. So we're implementing, but we're continuing to struggle with the transition.
We'll get to the integrated in just a little bit so we could follow up on that. But I want to give Ryan an opportunity. I want to remind everyone, by the way, that Mike and Bob have the questions if any questions emerge as they're talking. So Ryan, how about your perspective of Common Core?
Great. I agree. I think that we're all experimenting with this new transition to the Common Core. I'm really fortunate to work at Catherine Smith Elementary, where we've been a little bit progressive with our approach regarding project-based learning. We were kind of the pioneers of the Common Core in our district with taking on this new instructional approach and strategy. I feel fortunate in Evergreen. They've really done a great job empowering their teachers regarding professional development. We've collaborated a lot with West Ed in how to pilot and create and write our own units around the Common Core. So Evergreen has created a team of teacher experts that are now unit writers and designers, and they create a unit for both ELA and math, completely aligned with the Common Core, and then those teachers are in charge of presenting that material at work group sessions. So there's true collaboration and this teacher autonomy, which I think is the scary part of the Common Core. I know I've been a teacher for 10 years, and I feel like when I came out of teacher prep, I was given this TE, and it was kind of like my roadmap, and I felt really safe. And now the Common Core is asking us to really find our own resources or find other best practices, and I think that could be a little scary without the right professional development.
Thank you. Chris?
So I really appreciate the comments around, it's not the implementation of the Common Core, it's truly the transition to the Common Core. Because for any of us to really believe that we're going to see major change in teaching and in how students demonstrate their learning in 1 year is crazy. It's asinine. To truly show how effective the Common Core will be, we really can only truly measure it with our incoming kindergartners. And once they go through the entire system, compare to see how well and how effective the transition to Common Core is. For Eastside, infrastructure, technology, we're there. The equipment, the tools, the laptops we have. Are we ready for Common Core? No. Are we transitioning to the Common Core? Yes. We have what we've called the Eastside Alliance, and the Eastside Alliance is made up of the high school district and the 7 feeder districts. So you have Orchard, you have Allen Rock, you have Franklin McKinley, you have Mount Pleasant, Evergreen, and you have Oak Grove school districts. And we've agreed to work together as the Eastside Alliance and with the implementation of the Common Core. And the first transition to is this focus on math, and it's the integrated math approach. And so we've agreed to focus from 6th to 11th grade, but in high school, we're not as far ahead as Campbell there. We're we're introducing Integrated 1 in the fall, and then the following year, Course 2, and the third year, Course 3. And we have an agreement among the Alliance that in 8th grade, they will teach the high school integrated Course 1, because that's really the biggest issue in our area. That is, what is the sequence of courses, and what about acceleration in the middle school? That's the biggest concern among parents. And I did have some slides, although I feel intimidated now that I'm sitting next to a math teacher that knows it even better. But I think the slides are critical to talk about because it's a difference, it's a conversation I think that our Valley's gonna have. Why did Eastside, why did Campbell, why did Live Oak, why did some school districts move to the integrated approach and others stay with the traditional sequence of algebra, geometry, algebra 2, quote, under the Common Core? And I think most people do not understand the difference between when those standards are being covered. And for us, it was about making that paradigm, that shift that all of our teachers understand. You're not teaching the traditional sequence. Even the new sequence in Common Core around algebra, geometry, algebra 2, the standards are not being covered the same as an integrated approach. And we just felt that we needed to make that significant change, not only for our parents and students, but particularly for our teachers. Because my concern is a lot of teachers will just continue, who've been teaching for 15, 20 years, to teach the traditional sequence and say, I'm doing Common Core, without making that shift.
So this question here is going to be for the superintendent. I've got 2 excellent questions here that I'm going to jump to in just a little bit. But, and more for Wendy and Chris. How did you approach professional development? I mean, there's obviously, we're talking about this is a completely new way of doing things. Most of the teachers have been hired since 2000, I'm thinking, right? It's been a huge transition. Tremendous needs for professional development. How have you approached that?
Well, for us, we took basically a general approach with getting our teachers over the last couple of years just immersed in the new standards so they could see the difference between the prior and then the Common Core. We approached it from a team of about 125 teachers district-wide, engaging with the county. That was the launching point, and then going back and using those teachers at their school sites. We are now engaged at a point where we're beyond that general place. And so for this current year, because we're also in that transition of implementing, we looked first at our middle schools, and the reason why is math, as Chris said, and probably everyone here will say, is a big topic in the county. And so in our community, math is a huge topic. So what we did is we went to the middle schools because we know our students are going to struggle with the transitions the most, and moving through the new course sequence and making sure that the old algebra switches over to the new algebra, because we're not going integrated. So what we did is we engaged our middle school math teachers in professional development minds on math. So that was a step for us. The other thing we did is with our English teachers at all of 5 of our middle schools, and they opted in, by the way. We didn't demand it, so it wasn't something where we came and said, you're all doing this. We took a poll of our schools. We sent some teachers out who tested it out last year, and then starting this year, they came back and said, we're all in. And so they're engaged with inquiry by design. So they went through a process of learning this year. There's some coaching embedded in that. They're sharing with each other, and that's helping students really get into text. So that was our launch for the middle school. Then with the elementary schools, what we're doing is with elementary it's different because you can't say to one teacher, guess what, we're going to immerse you in math professional development, language arts professional development. At the same time, we're asking you to change the report card and approach your grading differently because we're piloting that too. So what we're doing is we're asking our school sites to choose an area of focus, and their professional development will be that area of focus over this summer and all of next year. So our PD cycles will look like professional development over the summer. Teachers will get coaching and follow-up work all of next year. Our schools will then be grouped by their choice for those focus areas so that they can collaborate and work with each other. So that's the primary approach. The other thing we did, and I think it was essential for our work moving forward with the transitional point that's been mentioned, is that when you're embarking on such a huge change, you can't ignore the change process. You can't just say, well, just go forth and do it, and then hope it all works out. Because you have a lot of fear, you have a lot of issues within the system that are changing. So we had our entire management team, 85 people, spend 10 days of learning to get certified in human systems dynamics, which is human systems change. And that way, as we're moving through the system, it didn't matter if you're in food service or where you were in the system, everyone would work together. And as those issues of change and transition and those pain points came up, we would all be able to recognize them and then adjust and deal with them in a way that's going to be helpful to everybody in the system.
Anyone want to comment on the professional development part?
Well, just the other piece for us, working with the Eastside Alliance and with the facilitation of Silicon Valley Education Foundation, we have been doing math symposiums for the last 2 years. And so we're tying not only the understanding and the map crosswalking from the current standard or the old standards to the Common Core standards, but now we're moving into the content training of teachers, because particularly for our 8th grade teachers in the Alliance, they may not be as comfortable with the integrated approach, and so it's critical that we provide that resource for them. So that's an ongoing process that started last year. It's moving through this school year, and then we're going to be doing a full 5-week intensive academy this summer for all of our math teachers. And then the other focus has been literacy across the curriculum, supporting all of our teachers with developing the rubrics that our art, science, social science teachers can also use.
Ryan, you said something that I found kind of intriguing. You made the comment that teachers have a lot more autonomy, and that can be kind of scary. What does that look like? What does that mean?
Well, I think Wendy made a good point when she said that it definitely looks different for elementary because there's so much, right? One thing that Evergreen did, which I think was really smart, was that every elementary site has an instructional coach. And that instructional coach, in many cases, I'm an instructional coach. I'm also a coach at the same site where I am a teacher. So I have this ability to receive training around the Common Core, learning how to shift my pedagogy so that I can demonstrate those lessons to teachers on our campus. At our site, it's a little different. We're using project-based learning, but we're still teaching foundational skills at the elementary level. So we have to be really careful that, especially in math, that we're focusing on those critical areas and that teachers know what the critical areas are, the grade level above them and the grade level below them, and that the coach can assist in that way. So when I said autonomy, I think I meant that sometimes the Common Core is giving us this freedom to release ourselves from following the scope and sequence, say, of a teacher's edition. And that one way that Evergreen is addressing that is by having an instructional coach that's there, that's a teacher leader, a teacher expert that understands exactly how it feels so that the implementation can be more successful.
So Manny, this one is for you. I heard a great quote from a principal that said, "My teachers are still waiting for their Common Core curriculum to show up in a box." How can administrators help their teachers move away from this mindset? What do you think?
I think everyone's still waiting for that magic box. I look every day on my phone, UPS tracker. But, I think one of the things that I've been able to do at my site is understanding, kind of building off what you said, there's this new idea of you have freedom to teach. But you don't want to be too free where then you kind of do whatever you are going to do and maybe make a mistake, or if people have that fear of that, where we've had to really collaborate across grades. And so on my site, my teachers have really looked to see what are some best skills, practices, resources that they could use across grade levels. And so we've kind of chunked it from kinder to, first, and then second through, third, and then fourth through sixth, where they can really look and see, we want to build some capacity within our students, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel each year as well. So when this curriculum does arrive, or some form of curriculum arrives, we'll have some things in place where the students will be able to have a skill set where they can manipulate the curriculum appropriately, so that they can leave, and that was the other thing. We really looked at what are the outcomes we really want of our students. No longer in terms of the answer B or C, but in regards to what level and variety of levels do we want our kids to have. So that's been a real big mind shift for the teachers, because, again, we are used to opening our book and looking for the red check marks and really moving along that way. And I think for myself, as the leader of this movement at my site, is really reinforcing to them that it's okay. I think really reminding them and checking in with them, and really moving away from the old assessment types and looking for more of this formative type assessment for themselves. And so that's the other little piece where, again, reprogramming ourselves and our staffs, where people don't have to think, okay, because with the curriculum came a test, and they're looking, well, what is this test supposed to look like? So that whole retraining has allowed my staff to feel more comfortable and confident as they've been moving and keeping track of what they've been doing.
So the questions are coming in fast and furious here, and there's some really good ones here. So Wendy L.
I just wanted to add one more thing
Sure,
to that, if I
sure.
could. So Manny brought up a really good point. The teacher in me is ooh, the ooh moment, right? So just because it's Common Core aligned doesn't mean it's better. And I think that teacher voice and choice is what the autonomy is, and that someone had mentioned in panel one that the principal as the instructional leader is what drives that. And at Catherine Smith, we're implementing a math series, Expressions, which is Common Core aligned. And what we're finding is that parts of it are good, but other things are better. And that a blending of those resources is how you teach students to achieve standards on a more deeper level.
Thank you for
That
weighing
more
in.
deeper.
So Wendy, this is kind of a follow-up related to that. I mean, we heard Mike mention, Mike Hurst talk about, we really don't have a curriculum, especially when you got started on this. And you said you started to do some Common Core. What did you use? What was guiding your efforts along that line?
Gosh, what have we used to guide us? We have a document that we call the Pearson Scope and Sequence. We found it on Mr. McCollum's blog, commoncoretools.me or something to that effect. That was really one of our big
It was
jumping.
Mr. Who?
McCallum
Okay.
is the last name. I know how to find it online.
Okay.
But what it did was it took the Common Core standards, because one of the things we're used to is here are the Algebra 1 standards, here are the geometry standards, here are the Algebra 2 standards. What a lot of people outside education don't understand is that at the high school level, the Common Core standards are not organized by course, they're organized by strand. So we have number and quantity, and now I'm cheating by looking at the slide on the board. We have number and quantity, algebra, function, geometry, and statistics. And somehow we're supposed to mix those all together into a 3-year course sequence. What in the world was that supposed to look like? The standards themselves did not give us that direction. So we found this document that organized them into units and then organized those units into courses in a way that we were able to wrap our brains around a little bit more specifically. Once we had an understanding of what the course looked like, then we could start looking at curricular resources, and we've been using things like the Mathematics Visions Project out of Utah, and looking at some of the resources out of New York, and the Kansas flip books that provide examples of each of the Common Core state standards, and trying to bring together all those different resources. As you were saying, it's all about blending and taking this good idea here and this good idea here and implementing that in our classrooms. Collaboration has become huge, because for one teacher to take all of this on the island of our classroom was going to be just not a tenable solution. So it's really been a collaborative effort where we've tried to look at those resources that are available and choose the best practices and the best resources, and being able to share things online with things like, what did you call it, a digital binder? A live binder. We have School Loop, which we are able to have things available as links online that all the teachers that teach the courses can be accessing. And so we're able to collaborate across our sites even when we're not physically in the same space. And so those are some of the things that we've tried to
So
do.
it's one of the questions we have from the audience here is everything sounds so super in Silicon Valley. Where are the problems? It can't be perfect. So I'll just kind of open that up. Who'd like to, so let me reframe it another way. What are the challenges? What are your biggest challenges as you approach this right now? Like what keeps you awake in terms of what Common Core? Manny, go ahead.
I was just going to say quickly, it's the time. I think one of the things that I worry most about is the help of my teachers. They put in the amount of time that you would probably expect from like a startup, 22-year-old kid who doesn't have a family, but my teachers have families, and we're not all 22 anymore. And so I worry about them, and because they strive to be excellent, they strive to put in that extra piece of work to make sure that their kids are going to get it. That some of them are burning the candle on both ends. So for me, that's that biggest issue. And that's where, as the instructional leader, I have to remind them it's okay to go home. It's okay to turn it off. And so that's been a hard balance for me, because you don't want to stifle any creativity, but at the same time, you want the teachers to be there when we start really seeing the fruits of our labor in a few years, when these kids are starting to get it to that next level.
Okay.
And I think for us, it's been making sure that we communicate really well with our parent community. Because our parents, like I said earlier, are very attentive to their children's education. And so for us, it's been in the area of math. And we started a campaign last year to engage the parent community. And what we've been doing at some of our events, we have we had town halls. We had 500 parents show up each of those nights for 2,500 parents. I put out a video a few months ago, and it had 6,500 hits, I think, within 24 hours around the math concept. We brought in a math professor from UC Berkeley who could help explain the shifts that were happening in math so that our parents can understand them better. Tonight, we're launching tonight and tomorrow night 2 parent math engagement nights, and we opened the registration, and within a few hours, we filled almost 900 seats in the 2 nights. And so our parents will be engaged with math tasks tonight and tomorrow night, so they can actually get an understanding of what their children are expected to do. And so for us, it's not just because the parents need to know, that's one thing, but our teachers also, there's a pressure on the teachers, and they're getting lots of questions, and we have to, as a community, make sure that our parents are well-versed and aren't putting too much pressure on those schools as we transition, because we aren't there yet, and helping them to understand that. So I think for us, that's probably been it. Once we got over the answering the course sequence question and the acceleration question, it died down a little bit, but then it picked back up to say, so now what am I supposed to do as a parent to help my
So
child?
let's go there. We can have those slides back up there again, because Chris, I want to ask you, because I know those are your slides, because I've got a couple of questions here. I have to go here. Then I'm going to ask you what you think your biggest challenge is with this. You have that pathway there, and several people here want to know is, we have Campbell.
Actually, if we go to the pathway, go to the next slide.
Okay, so.
That's our sequence.
Okay, so before you get onto it, I'm going to ask this question, so the people in the audience know what this is all about here. Because it's come up a couple of times. Integrated, math is the challenge, traditional. So we have Campbell, integrated, I heard you say, right? Chris, I'm going to ask you to talk about that. And then one of the questions, Wendy, you're going traditional route.
Yes.
How did you arrive at this decision? Because people want to know, how did we end up integrated here and the traditional sequence here? And for the audience, just to kind of summarize on that, there's the course pattern, the traditional sequence, algebra, geometry, algebra 2, and then there's the course 1, course 2, course 3, integrated 1, 2, and 3. So they're different kind of models. So would you go through that then?
I would go back to the previous
Okay.
slide then.
So Chris, go ahead, and I'll let you go ahead and tackle that one first.
So what we did was we worked with all of our math teachers and had conversations around which is the most appropriate approach to take. And although we did not ask for votes that would determine the direction, we did ask for input with the vote. And quite frankly, on each side, it was slightly higher to stay with the traditional. It was about 57% wanted to stay traditional. And at that point, that's when I made the decision that I didn't think that was the appropriate way to go. Because when you look at the sequence, well,
So
we're
why
not-
is- why is
it's not a
superintendent?
democratic process, it's asking for feedback, right? But as I said earlier, I'm real concerned that traditional math teachers may think that they're already meeting the needs of Common Core. And if you look at the new sequence there, you want me to lean forward? I'm sorry. When you look at the sequence there, even the new algebra, the new sequence under Common Core is completely different from the traditional sequence. And for me, it was 3 reasons why to make the switch to integrated. First, we're being compared internationally. The whole reason we're moving to Common Core is because we have international countries doing better than us. And in those countries that are doing better than us, our students their students are doing better than our students, they have an integrated approach. So if it's working for other countries with integrated approach, that made sense to me. Second, kindergarten through 8th grade is an integrated approach. So why would we then go back to a traditional approach when they enter high school? So yes, there's going to be that transition for the next couple years with our students and our parents being used to the traditional sequence. But for me, it just made sense to continue that integrated approach. And when you look at the fact that standards are being covered all 3 years, they're not being taught in isolation. Therefore, our students that are struggling passing algebra, taking it for a second time, or struggling getting out of Algebra 2, they now have an opportunity to have those same standards being covered throughout the 3 years. And I think they have a better way of sticking with those standards. And then the third point is what I mentioned earlier. I just think that we need to make a complete shift on the paradigm and move away from the traditional sequence and just move towards the integrated process that's tied to
I want to get through a lot of questions. I'm
I
going to
just
ask you to
wanna add a
respond
fourth
quickly on
point.
this, and I want Wendy to respond. Go ahead, Wendy.
Yeah, just a 4th point, one of the reasons we chose to go integrated was the acceleration issue that you're speaking of. On the math side of things, the acceleration issue was big. And when you look at the grades 6, 7, 8 curriculum that's integrated, from our perspective, it became easier to accelerate if you follow up with the integrated program in high school, because condensing those courses becomes a little bit easier in some senses. So that was just a point number 4, was from the acceleration side of things was part of our decision-making process.
Okay. Wendy, in terms of your traditional, so what went into, because
Well-
you're feeding into the high school. too,
Right, so we're a K-8, and we're a K-8 with another neighborhood K-8, and we feed into a high school district. So we can't just pronounce anything because we have to our students have to feed into the high school. So it was a conversation back and forth with the high school, but in some respects it's driven by the high school, but also by the community, because the concern is for our community is where the students end up. That's the bottom line. And the question was, do you want to fight that fight, or do you want to spend all of our time and energy focusing on how we're teaching math and what we're teaching? So helping teachers, help the community, help everyone understand that there's a shift in what and how we're teaching, rather than spending the next 5 years fighting a course sequence. And that's really what it came down to. Because yet we would not have been able to move forward and engage in the work in our community if we did not choose the traditional pathway. And if we had chosen not to accelerate, we would have been in the same boat. Because right now, we are, and it's the old system, new test is coming, the data will be different. But what we do know in our schools is that over 90% of our kids, about 93% of our students, leave proficient and advanced. And they're that way all the way through the system. And so there's a whole lot of pressure there. And basically it was, why are we fighting that fight?
So
So
Manny,
many
if you just look at that next slide. real
Yeah,
quick.
we're kind of down to the last 5 minutes, so
And all I was
Chris,
gonna
you
just
can do
say
it,
is,
flip over.
everyone in every community's goal is to have their child take Calculus BC,
Right.
their senior year. So whether you go traditional or integrated, we have that pathway.
So your point, and I think just to kind of summarize what I'm hearing, is there are political issues in your community with parents, and part of it has to do, Chris, what I heard you referring to is what's the pathway
Correct.
to get to that calculus. I want to ask Ryan a very quick question here, because I think this pertains to you. What, not you personally, but what is being done to support the K-5 teachers? I mean, let's face it.
Can
if
you
you're-
repeat that? I'm sorry.
If you're a middle school teacher, right, you might be a math teacher or a language arts teacher, but the K-5 teachers, the elementary school teachers, math, language arts, they've got to teach everything. What kind of support is being provided to the elementary K-5 or K-6 teachers, depending on the configuration?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's like a balancing act on which professional development you give.
Right.
One strategy that we do use in Evergreen is the teacher workshop model, and the workshops are split evenly. So teachers get in-depth math training one particular Thursday with strategies that they can go ahead and implement right away in the classroom, and then the next time is English language arts kind of strategy. I will say that the challenging part is that there are 3 essential shifts in both ELA and math. I mean, some people argue there's 6, but there are 3 just grouped, right? So that's kind of a debate as well. But with ELA, we've really only touched on one, and that's the text-based answer or text-based question. And there's so much more that needs to be covered. And I think that some of the feedback we've been getting, especially at with teachers at Catherine Smith, is that when are we going to get more? And I just think that the point of slowing it down is important, and that let's learn to do one thing really well at a time, and that text-based, text-dependent questioning and answering kind of takes itself through language arts and through math and all of the subjects, actually.
So we're really dive so many more questions here, but we're down to the end. So I'm just going to ask one final question of each of you. You have state leaders here. If you could say, here's what we need, 1 or 2 things, and try to be as realistic as possible in this as we're moving forward, because there's obviously so much more that needs to be done. What is it that you would want? And it can start, Manny, you want to start from a principal perspective, and you're a first-time principal, probably during the most challenging time, and here you are. What would you?
That idea of communication, I think figuring out a way to communicate to both parents, teachers, every stakeholder connected to the school system, that we are in this major transition.
So like a
Like
wide-range statewide communication blitz, say, for example.
Yeah, because
to
I
the-
think
to
there's
answer.
still
Okay.
a giant fear that an axe will come. Something will come, and people, from the parents' perspective, this might change. What if my child's not ready, or their test score, or whatever it might be. So some global type
Yeah.
of
In fact, one of the
communication.
questions you had to do with concerns about teacher evaluation, so just really kind of communicating what we're about, okay?
Yep.
Thank you. Who else would like to, you could,
Well, I would agree with the approach of California covered. If we could do that type as for moving into medical benefits coverage, that would be fantastic. That's not necessarily the state board, that's the state legislature
Right.
providing the money for that.
to support, yeah.
And then just time. And in terms of the accountability, I've never been a huge fan of the API or the CSTs because the API, the CST has never stopped a student from getting into college. So I just hope that we take our time with the new accountability system and give us a chance to do it right.
So what you're getting, because in fact in New York, there's a little bit of backlash on that, is before we jump forward on that, let it happen over a period of time. Okay? Anyone? Wendy, what would you?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. In particular, until the materials are available, until there are resources across the board and some of the questions get answered across the board, give us that time. And then follow it up, because when you say time for teachers to sit together and time for schools to sit together, that requires money. That just doesn't happen. And so we absolutely need the authorization of the Common Core money, the reauthorization of the Common Core money.
Thank you. And the teachers, I deliberately wanted to keep you last for this hands because you're
our
the
list is
ones,
longer.
you're the ones, well, you're the ones, I mean, let's face it, you're the ones that have to implement all of this. So what is it right now that if you could wish, what would be the most important things that you would want?
Sure. We're in Silicon Valley, and technology is such a huge part of everything that we do. And my point of view is that I don't want people to give me iPads and laptops and everything else. I want training on how do I create better performance tasks using technology in my classroom with students so that they are prepared for smarter balanced. I would love networking with more stakeholders in our community, within our districts, within neighboring schools, on how we can incorporate better teaching strategies with technology.
Thank you.
And I was
Wendy?
sitting here struggling to know what to say, and then she said exactly what I was going to say.
That's what we're here for, teachers.
Exactly. So basically, I guess what that says is that at all levels, elementary through high school, we're all struggling with the same issues. I guess what I can add that actually came up on the first panel was, what does it mean to be career ready? As high school teachers, we've got a pretty good handle on A to G and a pretty good understanding of what it means to be college ready, but we don't have a really good handle on what it means to be career ready. How should we be using technology in our classrooms to make our students truly career ready in the 21st century? We need more training. We need help in that regard.
Well, I want to thank each of you for your candor and honesty in terms of you're the ones that have to implement this. And everyone, please join me in let's acknowledging the efforts that they have. Thank you very much. For some of you had questions. You put your names. I'd be happy to introduce you to the panelists, and you can ask them or just come up here and ask them directly. At this time, I would like to ask my colleague, Rosemary, and before she comes up, I would like to thank my colleagues at the Silicon Valley Education Foundation for all the time and effort they put into this, especially my assistant, Michelle, who I do not see, wherever she is. There she is. Thank you very much, Michelle. Rosemary?
Thank you so much, Manny. For those of you who are interested in getting copies of this session today was recorded and it will be available. So it will be available on our website. It will also be available on Create TV. So lots of opportunity to get the slides and all of the information. At this time, I'd like to thank Southwest Airlines for providing the round-trip tickets. The money that is raised through this silent auction is for our STEM education programs. And so after the meeting today, if Mahuya Dahar can see me outside, as well as Suzanne Nakashima. I would like to thank Microsoft as our other sponsor and host here today, as well as Texas Instrument, who is a sponsor of today's event. And thank you very much for your attention, and thank you very much for coming.